Chapter 10. Activity of Soapy Malloy 1. Soapy Malloy replaced the receiver and came out of the telephone cupboard glowing with the resolve to go right ahead and clean up as his helpmate had directed. Like all good husbands, he felt that his wife was an example and an inspiration to him. Mopping his fine forehead, for it had been warm in the cupboard with the door shut, he stood for a while and mused, sketching out in his mind a plan of campaign. The prudent man, before embarking on any enterprise which may at a moment's notice necessitate his skipping away from a given spot like a scolded cat, will always begin by preparing his lines of retreat. Mr. Malloy's first act was to go to the stable-yard in order to ascertain with his own eyes that the Dex Mayo was still there. It was. It stood out on the gravel, simply waiting for someone to spring to its wheel and be off. So far, so good. But how far actually was it? The really difficult part of the operations, Mr. Malloy could not but recognize, still lay before him. The knockout drops nestled in his waistcoat pocket all ready for use, but in order to bring about the happy ending it was necessary for him, like some conjurer doing a trick, to transfer them thence to the interior of Mr. Lester Carmody. And little by little, chilling his enthusiasm, there crept upon Soapy the realization that he had not a notion how the deuce this was to be done. The whole question of administering knockout drops to a fellow creature is a very delicate and complex one. So much depends on the cooperation of the party of the second part. Before you can get anything in the nature of action, your victim must first be induced to start drinking something. At Healthward Ho, Soapy had gathered from the recent telephone conversation, no obstacles had arisen. The thing had been, apparently, from the start a sort of jolly carousal. But at Rudge Hall, it was plain, matters were not going to be nearly so simple. When you are a guest in a man's house, you cannot very well go about thrusting drinks on your host at 11:30 in the morning. Probably Mr. Carmody would not think of taking liquid refreshment till lunch-time, and then there would be a butler in and out of the room all the while. Besides, lunch would not be for another 2 hours or more, and the whole essence of this enterprise was that it should be put through swiftly and at once. Mr. Malloy groaned in spirit. He wandered forth into the garden, turning the problem over in his mind with growing desperation, and had just come to the conclusion that he was mentally unequal to it when, reaching the low wall that bordered the moat, he saw a sight which sent the blood coursing joyously through his veins once more, a sight which made the world a thing of sunshine and bird-song again. Out in the middle of the moat lay the punt. In the punt sat Mr. Carmody, and in Mr. Carmody's hand was a fishing rod. Aesthetically considered, wearing, as he did, a pink shirt and a slouch hat which should long ago have been given to the deserving poor, Mr. Carmody was not much of a spectacle, but Soapy, eyeing him, felt that he had never beheld anything lovelier. He was not a fisherman himself, but he knew all about fishermen. They became, he was aware, when engaged on their favourite pursuit, virtually monomaniacs. Earthquakes might occur in their immediate neighbourhood, dynasties fall and pestilences ravage the land, but they would just go on fishing. As long as the bait held out, Lester Carmody, sitting in that punt, was for all essential purposes as good as if he had been crammed to the brim of the finest knockout drops. It was as though he were in another world. Exhilaration filled Soapy like a tonic. "Any luck?" he shouted. "Wah, wah, wah," replied Mr. Carmody inaudibly. "Step to it," cried Soapy. "Attaboy!" With an encouraging wave of the hand he hurried back to the house. The problem which a moment before had seemed to defy solution had now become so simple and easy that a child could have negotiated it. Any child, that is to say, capable of holding a hatchet, and endowed with sufficient strength to break a cupboard door with it. "I'm towing the birds, towing the bees," sang Soapy gaily, charging into the hall. "Towing the flowers, towing the trees, how I love you." "Sir," said Sturgis respectfully, suddenly becoming manifest out of the infinite. Soapy gazed at the butler blankly, his wild wood notes dying away in a guttural gurgle. Apart from the embarrassment which always comes upon a man when caught singing, he was feeling, as Sturgis himself would have put it, startled. A moment before, the place had been completely free from butlers, and where this one could have come from was more than he could understand. Rudge Hall's old retainer did not look the sort of man who would pop up through traps, but there seemed no other explanation of his presence. And then, close to the cupboard door, Soapy espied another door, covered with green baize. This, evidently, was the Sturgis bolt-hole. "Now then," he said. "I thought you called, sir." "No." "Lovely day, sir." "Beautiful," said Soapy. He gazed bulgily at this inconvenient old fossil. Once more, shadows had fallen about his world, and he was brooding again on the deep gulf that is fixed between artistic conception and detail work. The broad artistic conception of breaking open the cupboard door and getting away with the swag while Mr. Carmody, anchored out on the moat, dabbled for bream or dibbled for chub or sniggled for eels or whatever weak-minded thing it is the fishermen do when left to themselves in the middle of a sheet of water, was magnificent. It was bold, dashing, big in every sense of the word. Only when you came to inspect it in detail did it occur to you that it might also be a little noisy. That was the fatal flaw, the noise. The more Soapy examined the scheme, the more clearly did he see that it could not be carried through in even comparative quiet. And the very first blow of the hammer or axe or chisel selected for the operation must inevitably bring Methuselah's little brother popping out through that green baize door, full of inquiries.
"Hell,"
said Soapy.
"So?" "Nothing," said Soapy. "I was just thinking."
He continued to think, and to such effect that before long he had begun to see daylight. There is no doubt that in time of stress the human mind has an odd tendency to take off its coat and roll up its sleeves, and generally spread itself in a spasm of unwonted energy. Probably if this thing had been put up to Mr. Malloy as an academic problem over the nuts and wine after dinner, he would have had to confess himself baffled. Now, however, with such vital issues at stake, it took him but a few minutes to reach the conclusion that what he required, as he could not break open a cupboard door in silence, was some plausible reason for making a noise. He followed up this line of thought. A noise of smashing wood. In what branch of human activity may a man smash wood blamelessly? The answer is simple. When he is doing carpentering. What sort of carpentering? Why, making something. What? Oh, anything. Yes, but what? Well, say for example a rabbit hutch. But why a rabbit hutch? Well, a man might very easily have a daughter who, in her girlish impulsive way, has decided to keep pet rabbits. Mightn't he? There actually were pet rabbits on the Rudge Hall estate, weren't there? Certainly there were. Soapy had seen them down at one of the lodges. The thing began to look good. It only remained to ascertain whether Sturgis was the right recipient for this kind of statement. The world may be divided broadly into two classes. Men who will believe you when you suddenly inform them at 11:30 on a summer morning that you propose to start making rabbit hutches, and men who will not. Sturgis looked as if he belonged to the former and far more likable class. He looked, indeed, like a man who would believe anything.
"Say,"
said Soapy.
"Sir?" "My daughter wants me to make her a rabbit hutch."
"Indeed, sir?" Soapy felt relieved. There had been no incredulity in the other's gaze. On the contrary, something that looked very much like a sort of senile enthusiasm. He had the air of a butler who has heard good news from home.
"Have you got such a thing as a packing case or a sugar box or something like that? And a hatchet?"
"Yes, sir."
"Then fetch them along."
"Very good, sir." The butler disappeared through his green baize door, and Soapy, to fill in the time of waiting, examined the cupboard. It appeared to be a very ordinary sort of cupboard, the kind that a resolute man can open with one well-directed blow. Soapy felt complacent. Though primarily a thinker, it pleased him to feel that he could be the man of action when the occasion called. There was a noise of bumping without. Sturgis reappeared, packing case in one hand, hatchet in the other, looking like Noah taking ship's stores aboard the Ark. "Here they are, sir."
"Thanks."
"I used to keep Roberts when I was a lad, sir," said the butler. "Oh dear, yes, many's the Robert I've made a pet of in my time. Roberts and white mice, those were what I was fondest of, and newts in a little aquarium." He leaned easily against the wall, beaming, and Soapy, with deep concern, became aware that the last of the great Victorians proposed to make this thing a social gathering. He appeared to be regarding Soapy as the nucleus of a salon.
"Don't let me keep you,"
said Soapy. "You aren't keeping me, sir," the butler assured him. "Oh, no, sir, you aren't keeping me. I've done my silver. It will be a pleasure to watch you, sir. Quite likely I can give you a hint or two if you've never made a Robert hutch before. Many's the hutch I've made in my time. As a lad I was very handy at that sort of thing." A dull despair settled upon Soapy. It was plain to him now that he had unwittingly delivered himself over into the clutches of a bore who had probably been pining away for someone on whom to pour out his wealth of stored-up conversation. Words had begun to flutter out of this butler like bats out of a barn. He had become a sort of human topical talk on rabbits. He was speaking of rabbits he had known in his hot youth, their manners, customs, and the amount of lettuce they consumed per diem. To a man interested in rabbits but too lazy to look up the subject in the encyclopedia, the narrative would have been enthralling. It induced in Soapy a feverishness that touched the skirts of homicidal mania. The thought came into his mind that there are other uses to which a hatchet may be put, besides the making of rabbit hutches. England trembled on the verge of being short one butler. Sturgis had now become involved in a long story of his early manhood, and even had Soapy been less distrait he might have found it difficult to enjoy it to the full. It was about an acquaintance of his who had kept rabbits, and it suffered in lucidity from his unfortunate habit of pronouncing rabbits Roberts, combined with the fact that by a singular coincidence the acquaintance had been a Mr. Roberts. Roberts, it seemed, had been deeply attached to Roberts. In fact, his practice of keeping Roberts in his bedroom had led to trouble with Mrs. Roberts, and in the end Mrs. Roberts had drowned the Roberts in the pond, and Roberts, who thought the world of his Roberts, and not quite so highly of Mrs. Roberts, had never forgiven her. Here Sturgis paused, apparently for comment.
"Is that so?"
said Soapy, breathing heavily. "Yes, sir."
"In the pond?"
"In the pond, sir." Like some open sesame, the word suddenly touched a chord in Soapy's mind.
"Say, listen,"
he said.
"all the while we've been talking I was forgetting that Mr. Carmody is out there on the pond."
"The moat, sir?"
"Call it what you like. Anyway, he's there fishing, and he told me to tell you to take him out something to drink."
Immediately Sturgis, the lecturer, with a change almost startling in its abruptness, became Sturgis, the butler, once more. The fanatic rabbit gleam died out of his eyes. "Very good, sir."
"I should hurry. His tongue was hanging out when I left him."
For an instant the butler wavered. The words had recalled to his mind a lop-eared doe which he had once owned, whose habit of putting out its tongue and gasping had been the cause of some concern to him in the late 70s. But he recovered himself. Registering a mental resolve to seek out this new-made friend of his later and put the complete facts before him, he passed through the green baize door. Soapy, alone at last, did not delay. With all the pent-up energy which had been accumulating within him during a quarter of an hour which had seemed a lifetime, he swung the hatchet and brought it down. The panel splintered. The lock snapped. The door swung open. There was an electric switch inside the cupboard. He pressed it down, and was able to see clearly. And having seen clearly, he drew back, his lips trembling with half-spoken words of the regrettable kind which a man picks up in the course of a lifetime spent in the less refined social circles of New York, Philadelphia, and Chicago. The cupboard contained an old raincoat, 2 hats, a rusty golf club, 6 croquet balls, a pamphlet on stock breeding, 3 umbrellas, a copy of the parish magazine for the preceding November, a shoe, a mouse, and a smell of apples, but no suitcase. That much Soapy had been able to see in the first awful disintegrating instant. No bag, box, portmanteau, or suitcase of any kind or description whatsoever. 2. Hope does not readily desert the human breast. After the first numbing impact of any shock, we most of us have a tendency to try to persuade ourselves that things may not be as bad as they seem. Some explanation, we feel, will be forthcoming shortly, putting the whole matter in a different light. And so, after a few moments during which he stood petrified, muttering some of the comments which, on the face of it, the situation seemed to demand, Soapy cheered up a little. He had, he reflected, no opportunity of private speech with his host this morning. If Mr. Carmody had decided to change his plans and deposit the suitcase in some other hiding place, he might have done so in quite good faith without Soapy's knowledge. For all he knew, in mentally labeling Mr. Carmody a fat, pop-eyed, crooked, swindling, pie-faced, double-crossing Judas, he might be doing him an injustice. Feeling calmer, though still anxious, he left the house and started towards the moat. Halfway down the garden he encountered Sturgis, returning with an empty tray. "You must have misunderstood Mr. Carmody, sir," said the butler genially, as one rabbit fancier to another. "He says he did not ask for any drink, but he came ashore and had it. If you're looking for him, you will find him in the boathouse." And in the boathouse Mr. Carmody was, lolling at his ease on the cushions of the punt, sipping the contents of a long glass. "Hello," said Mr. Carmody. "There you are." Soapy descended the steps. What he had to say was not the kind of thing a prudent man shouts at long range.
"Say,"
said Soapy, in a cautious undertone,
"I've been trying to get a word with you all the morning, but that darned policeman was around all the time."
"Something on your mind?" said Mr. Carmody affably. "I've caught 2 perch, a bream, and a grayling," he added, finishing the contents of his glass with a good deal of relish. Such was the condition of Soapy's nervous system that he very nearly damned the perch, the bream, and the grayling in the order named. But he checked himself in time. If ever, he felt, there was a moment when diplomacy was needed, this was it.
"Listen,"
he said.
"I've been thinking.
"Yes?"
I've been wondering if, after all, that closet you were going to put the stuff in is a safe place. somebody might be apt to take a look in it. Maybe, said Soapy tensely, that occurred to you. What makes you think that? It just crossed my mind. Oh, I thought perhaps you might have been having a look in that cupboard yourself.
Soapy moistened his lips, which had become uncomfortably dry.
But you locked it, surely,
he said. Yes, I locked it, said Mr. Carmody, but it struck me that after he had got the butler out of the way by telling him to bring me a drink, he might have thought of breaking the door open. In the silence which followed this devastating remark there suddenly made itself heard an odd gurgling noise, like a leaking cistern, and Soapy, gazing at his host, was shocked to observe that he had given himself up to an apoplectic spasm of laughter. Mr. Carmody's rotund body was quivering like a jelly, his eyes were closed, and he was rocking himself to and fro, and from his lips proceeded those hideous sounds of mirth. The hope which until this moment had been sustaining Soapy had never been a strong, robust hope. From birth it had been an invalid, and now, as he listened to this laughter, the poor sickly thing coughed quietly and died.
Oh dear, said Mr. Carmody, recovering. Very funny, very funny. You think it's funny, do you? Said Soapy. I do, said Mr. Carmody sincerely. I wish I could have seen your face when you looked in that cupboard.
Soapy had nothing to say. He was beaten, crushed, routed, and he knew it. He stared out hopelessly on a bleak world. Outside the boathouse the sun was still shining, but not for Soapy.
I've seen through you all along, my man,
proceeded Mr. Carmody, with ungenerous triumph.
Not from the very beginning, perhaps, because I really did suppose for a while that you were what you professed to be. The first thing that made me suspicious was when I cabled over to New York to make inquiries about a well-known financier named Thomas G. Malloy, and was informed that no such person existed.
Soapy did not speak. The bitterness of his meditations precluded words. His eyes were fixed on the trees and flowers on the other side of the water, and he was disliking these very much. Nature had done its best for the scene, and he thought nature a washout.
And then, proceeded Mr. Carmody, I listened outside the study window while you and your friends were having a little discussion, and I heard all I wanted to hear. Next time you have one of these board meetings of yours, Mr. Malloy, I suggest that you close the window and lower your voices. Yeah, said Soapy.
It was not, he was forced himself to admit, much of a retort, but it was the best he could think of. He was in the depths, and men who are in the depths seldom excel in the matter of rapier-like repartee.
I thought the matter over and decided that my best plan was to allow matters to proceed. I was disappointed, of course, to discover that that check of yours for $1 million or $2 million or whatever it was would not be coming my way. But,
said Mr. Carmody philosophically,
there was always the insurance money. It should amount to a nice little sum. Not what a man like you, accustomed to big transactions with Mr. Schwab and Pierpont Morgan, would call much, of course, but quite satisfactory to me. You think so?
Said Soapy, goaded to speech.
You think you're going to clean up on the insurance?
I do.
Then say, listen, let me tell you something. The insurance company is going to send a fellow down to inquire, isn't it? Well, what's to prevent me spilling the beans?
I beg your pardon.
What's to prevent me from telling him the burglary was a put-up job?
Mr. Carmody smiled tranquilly.
You're a good sense, I should imagine. How could you make such a story credible without involving yourself in more unpleasantness than I should imagine you would desire? I think I shall be able to rely on you for sympathetic silence, Mr. Malloy. Yeah?
I think so. And Soapy, reflecting, thought so too. For the process of bean-spilling to be enjoyable, he realized, the conditions have to be right.
I am offering a little reward, said Mr. Carmody,
gently urging the punt out into the open,
just to make everything seem more natural. £1,000 is the sum I am proposing to give for the recovery of this stolen property. You had better try for that. Well, I must not keep you here all the morning chattering away like this. No doubt you have much to do.
The punt floated out into the sunshine, and the roof of the boathouse hid this fat, conscienceless man from Soapy's eyes. From somewhere out in the great open spaces beyond came the sound of a paddle, wielded with a carefree joyousness. Whatever might be his guest's state of mind, Mr. Carmody was plainly in the pink. Soapy climbed the steps listlessly. The interview had left him weak and shaken. He brooded dully on this revelation of the inky depths of Lester Carmody's soul. It seemed to him that if this was what England's upper classes, who ought to be setting an example, were like, Great Britain could not hope to continue much longer as a first-class power, and it gave him, in his anguish, a little satisfaction to remember that in years gone by his ancestors had thrown off Britain's yoke. Beyond burning his eyebrows one 4th of July, when a boy, with a maroon that exploded prematurely, he had never thought much about this affair before, but now he was conscious of a glow of patriotic fervor. If General Washington had been present at that moment, Soapy would have shaken hands with him. Soapy wandered aimlessly through the sunlit garden. The little spurt of consolation caused by the reflection that, some 150 years previously, the United States of America had severed relations with the country which was to produce a man like Lester Carmody had long since ebbed away, leaving emptiness behind it. He was feeling very low, and in urgent need of one of those largely advertised tonics which claim to relieve anemia, brain fag, lassitude, anxiety, palpitations, faintness, melancholia, exhaustion, neurasthenia, muscular limpness, and depression of spirits. For he had got them all, especially brain fag and melancholia, and the sudden appearance of Sturgis, fluttering towards him down the gravel path, provided nothing in the nature of a cure. He felt that he had had all he wanted of the butler's conversation. Even at the most stimulating society enough is enough, and to Soapy about half a minute of Sturgis seemed a good medium dose for an adult. He would have fled, but there was nowhere to go. He remained where he was, making his expression as forbidding as possible. A motion picture director could have read that expression like a book. Soapy was registering deep disinclination to talk about rabbits. But for the moment, it appeared, Sturgis had put rabbits on one side. Other matters occupied his mind. "I beg your pardon, sir," he said, "but have you seen Mr. John?" "Mr. who?" "Mr. John, sir." So deep was Soapy's preoccupation that for a moment the name conveyed nothing to him. "Mr. Carmody's nephew, sir, Mr. Carroll." "Oh, yes, he went off in his car with my daughter." "Will he be gone long, do you think, sir?" Soapy could answer that one. "Yes," he said, "he won't be back for some time." "You see, when I took Mr. Carmody his drink, sir, he told me to tell Bolt, the chauffeur, to give me the ticket." "What ticket?" asked Soapy wearily. The butler was only too glad to reply. He had feared that this talk of theirs might be about to end all too quickly, and these explanations helped to prolong it. And now that he knew that there was no need to go on searching for John, his time was his own again. "It was a ticket for a bag which Mr. Carmody sent Bolt to leave at the cloakroom at Shrub Hill Station in Worcester this morning, sir. I now ascertain from Bolt that he gave it to Mr. John to give to Mr. Carmody." "What?" cried Soapy. "And Mr. John has apparently gone off without giving it to him. However, no doubt it is quite safe. Did you make satisfactory progress with the hutch, sir?" "Eh?" "The Robert hutch, sir." "What?" A look of concern came into Sturgis's face. His companion's manner was strange. "Is anything the matter, sir?" "Eh?" "Shall I bring you something to drink, sir?" Few men ever become so distrait that this particular question fails to penetrate. Soapy nodded feverishly. Something to drink was precisely what at this moment he felt he needed most. Moreover, the process of fetching it would relieve him for a time, at least, of the society of a butler who seemed to combine in equal proportions the outstanding characteristics of a porous plaster and a gadfly. "Yes," he replied. "Very good, sir." Soapy's mind was in a whirl. He could almost feel the brains inside his head heaving and tossing like an angry ocean. So that was what that smooth old crook had done with the stuff, stored it away in a left luggage office at a railway station. If circumstances had been such as to permit of a more impartial and detached attitude of mind, Soapy would have felt for Mr. Carmody's resource and ingenuity nothing but admiration. A left luggage office was an ideal place in which to store stolen property, as good as the innermost recesses of some safe deposit company's deepest vault. But numerous as were the emotions surging in his bosom, admiration was not one of them. For a while he gave himself up almost entirely to that saddest of mental exercises, the brooding on what might have been. If only he had known that John had the ticket. But he was a practical man. It was not his way to waste time torturing himself with thoughts of past failures. The future claimed his attention. What to do? All, he perceived, was not yet lost. It would be absurd to pretend that things were shaping themselves ideally, but disaster might still be retrieved. It would be embarrassing, no doubt, to meet Chimp Twist after what had occurred, but a man who would win to wealth must learn to put up with embarrassments. The only possible next move was to go over to Healthward Ho, reveal to Chimp what had occurred, and with his cooperation recover the ticket from John. Soapy brightened. Another possibility had occurred to him. If he were to reach Houthward Ho with the minimum of delay, it might be that he would find both Chimp and John still under the influence of those admirable drops, in which case a man of his resource would surely be able to insinuate himself into John's presence long enough to be able to remove a left luggage ticket from his person. But if 'twere done, then 'twere well 'twere done quickly. What he needed was the Dex Mayo, and the Dex Mayo was standing outside the stable-yard, waiting for him. He became a thing of dash and activity. For many years he had almost given up the exercise of running, but he ran now like the lissom athlete he had been in his early 20s. And as he came panting round the back of the house, the first thing he saw was the tail end of the car disappearing into the stable-yard.
"Hi!"
shouted Soapy, using for the purpose the last remains of his breath. The Dex Mayo vanished, and Soapy, very nearly a spent force now, arrived at the opening of the stable-yard just in time to see Bolt, the chauffeur, putting the key of the garage in his pocket after locking the door. Bolt was a thing of beauty. He gleamed in the sunshine. He was wearing a new hat, his Sunday clothes, and a pair of yellow shoes that might have been bits chipped off the sun itself. There was a carnation in his buttonhole. He would have lent tone to a garden party at Buckingham Palace. He regarded Soapy with interest.
"Been having a little run, sir?"
"The car!" croaked Soapy.
"I've just put it away, sir. Mr. Carmody has given me the day off to attend the wedding of the wife's niece over at Upston Snodsbury. I want the car." "I've just put it away, sir," said Bolt, speaking more slowly, and with the manner of one explaining something to an untutored foreigner. "Mr. Carmody has given me the day off. Mrs. Bolt's niece is being married over at Upton Snodsbury, and she's got a lovely day for it," said the chauffeur, glancing at the sky with something as near approval as a chauffeur ever permits himself. "Happy the bride that the sun shines on, they say. Not that I agree altogether with these old sayings. I know that when I and Mrs. Bolt was married it rained the whole time like cats and dogs, and we've been very happy indeed we've been, taking it by and large. I don't say we haven't had our disagreements, but taking it one way and another." It began to seem to Soapy that the staffs of English country houses must be primarily selected for their powers of conversation. Every domestic with whom he had come in contact in Rudge Hall had so far had at his disposal an apparently endless flow of lively small talk. The butler, if you let him, would gossip all day about rabbits, and here was the chauffeur apparently settling down to dictate his autobiography. And every moment was precious. With a violent effort he contrived to take in a stock of breath. "I want the car to go to Houthward Hall. I can drive it." The chauffeur's manner changed. Up till now he had been the cheery clubman meeting an old friend in the smoking-room and drawing him aside for a long intimate chat, but at this shocking suggestion he froze. He gazed at Soapy with horrified incredulity. "Drive the Dex Mayo, sir?" he gasped. "Over to Houthward Hall." The crisis passed. Bolt swallowed convulsively and was himself once more. One must be patient, he realized, with laymen. They do not understand. When they come to a chauffeur and calmly propose that their vile hands shall touch his sacred steering wheel, they are not trying to be deliberately offensive. It is simply that they do not know. "I'm afraid that wouldn't quite do, sir," he said with a faint reproving smile. "Don't you think I can drive?" "Not the Dex Mayo you can't, sir." Bolt spoke a little curtly, for he had been much moved and was still shaken. "Mr. Carmody don't like nobody handling his car but me." "But I must go over to Houthward Hall. It's important. Business." The chauffeur reflected. Fundamentally he was a kindly man, who liked to do his good deed daily. "Well, sir, there's an old push-bike of mine lying in the stables. You could take that if you liked. It's a little rusty, not having been used for some time, but I dare say it would carry you as far as Houthward Ho." Soapy hesitated for a moment. The idea of a 20-mile journey on a machine which he had always supposed to have become obsolete during his Knickerbocker days made him quail a little. Then the thought of his mission lent him strength. He was a desperate man, and desperate men must do desperate things. "Fetch it out," he said. Bolt fetched it out, and Soapy, looking upon it, quailed again. "Is that it?" he said, dully. "That's it, sir," said the chauffeur. There was only one adjective to describe this push-bike, the adjective blackguardly. It had that leering air, shared by some parrots and the baser variety of cat, of having seen and been jauntily familiar with all the sin of the world. It looked low and furtive. Its handlebars curved up instead of down. It had gaps in its spokes, and its pedals were naked and unashamed. A sans-culotte of a bicycle. The sort of bicycle that snaps at strangers. Said Soapy, ruminating. "Yes," said Soapy, still ruminating.
Then he remembered again how imperative was the need of reaching Haltford Hoe somehow.
"All right,"
he said, with a shudder. He climbed onto the machine, and after one majestic wobble passed through the gates into the park, pedaling bravely. As he disappeared from view, there floated back to Bolt, standing outside the stable-yard, a single agonized "Ouch!" Chauffeurs do not laugh, but they occasionally smile. Bolt smiled. He had been bitten by that bicycle himself. 4. It was 20 minutes past 1 that Butler Sturgis, dozing in his pantry, was jerked from slumber by the sound of the telephone bell. He had been hoping for an uninterrupted siesta, for he had had a perplexing and trying morning. First, on top of the most sensational night of his life, there had been all the nervous excitement of seeing policemen roaming about the place. Then the American gentleman, Mr. Malloy, had told him that Mr. Carmody wanted something to drink, and Mr. Carmody had denied having ordered it. Then Mr. Malloy had asked for a drink himself, and had disappeared without waiting to get it. And finally there was the matter of the cupboard. Mr. Malloy, after starting to build a rabbit hutch, had apparently suspended operations in favor of smashing in the door of the cupboard at the foot of the stairs. It was all very puzzling to Sturgis. Like most men of settled habit, he found the process of being puzzled upsetting. He went to the telephone, and a silver voice came to him over the wire. "Is this the hall? I want to speak to Mr. Carroll." Sturgis recognized the voice. "Miss Wyvern?" "Yes, is that Sturgis? I say, Sturgis, what has become of Mr. Carroll? I was expecting him here half an hour ago. Have you seen him about anywhere?" "I have not seen him since shortly after breakfast, miss. I understand that he went off in his little car with Miss Malloy." "What?" "Yes, miss, some time ago." There was silence at the other end of the wire.
"With Miss Malloy?"
said the silver voice flatly.
"Yes, miss."
Silence again.
"Did he say when he would be back?" "No, miss, but I understand that he was not proposing to return till quite late in the day."
More silence.
"Oh?" "Yes, miss. Any message I can give him?"
"No, thank you. No, it doesn't matter."
"Very good, miss."
Sturgis returned to his pantry. Pat, hanging up the receiver, went out into her garden. Her face was set and her lips compressed. A snail crossed her path. She did not tread on it, for she had a kind heart, but she gave it a look. It was a look which, had it reached John, at whom it was really directed, would have scorched him. She walked to the gate and stood leaning on it, staring straight before her. End of Chapter 10. Chapter 11. John in Captivity. 1. It had been the opinion of Dolly Malloy, expressed during her conversation with Mr. Twist, that John, on awakening from his drugged slumber, would find himself suffering from a headache. The event proved her a true prophet. John, as became one who prized physical fitness, had been all his life a rather unusually abstemious young man. But on certain rare occasions dotted through the years of his sojourn at Oxford he had permitted himself to relax. As, for instance, the night of his 21st birthday, boat race night in his freshman year, and perhaps most notable of all, the night of the university football match in the season when he had first found a place in the Oxford team, and had helped to win one of the most spectacular games ever seen at Twickenham. To celebrate each of these events he had lapsed from his normal austerity, and every time had woken on the morrow to a world full of greyness and horror and sharp-shooting pains. But never had he experienced anything to compare with what he was feeling now. He was dimly conscious that strange things must have been happening to him, and that these things had ended by depositing him on a strange bed in a strange room, but he was at present in no condition to give his situation any sustained thought. He merely lay perfectly still, concentrating all his powers on the difficult task of keeping his head from splitting in half. When eventually, moving with exquisite care, he slid from the bed and stood up, the first thing of which he became aware was that the sun had sunk so considerably that it was now shining almost horizontally through the barred window of the room. The air, moreover, which accompanied its rays through the window, had that cool fragrance which indicates the approach of evening. Poets have said some good things in their time about this particular hour of the day, but to John on this occasion it brought no romantic thoughts. He was merely bewildered. He had started out from Rudge not long after 11 in the morning, and here it was late afternoon. He moved to the window, feeling like Rip Van Winkle, and presently the sweet air, playing about his aching brow, restored him so considerably that he was able to make deductions and arrive at the truth. The last thing he could recollect was the man Twist handing him a tall glass. In that glass, it now became evident, must have lurked the cause of all his troubles. With an imbecile lack of the most elementary caution, inexcusable in one who had been reading detective stories all his life, he had allowed himself to be drugged. It was a bitter thought, but he was not permitted to dwell on it for long. Gradually, driving everything else from his mind, there stole upon him the realization that unless he found something immediately to slake the thirst which was burning him up, he would perish of spontaneous combustion. There was a jug on the washstand, and, tottering to it, he found it mercifully full to the brim. For the next few moments he was occupied, to the exclusion of all other mundane matters, with the task of seeing how much of the contents of this jug he could swallow without pausing for breath. This done, he was at leisure to look about him and examine the position of affairs. That he was a prisoner was proved directly he tested the handle of the door. And, as further evidence, there were those bars on the window. Whatever else might be doubtful, the one thing certain was that he would have to remain in this room until somebody came along and let him out. His first reaction on making this discovery was a feeling of irritation at the silliness of the whole business. Where was the sense of it? Did this man Twist suppose that in the heart of peaceful Worcestershire he could immure a fellow forever in an upper room of his house? And then his clouded intellect began to function more nimbly. Twist's behavior, he saw, was not so childish as he had supposed. It had been imperative for him to gain time in order to get away with his loot, and, John realized, he had most certainly gained it. And the longer he remained in this room, the more complete would be the scoundrel's triumph. John became active. He went to the door again and examined it carefully. A moment's inspection showed him that nothing was to be hoped for from that quarter. A violent application of his shoulder did not make the solid oak so much as quiver. He tried the window. The bars were firm. Tugging had no effect on them. There seemed to John only one course to pursue. He shouted. It was an injudicious move. The top of his head did not actually come off, but it was a very near thing. By a sudden clutch at both temples he managed to avert disaster in the nick of time, and tottered weakly to the bed. There for some minutes he remained, while unseen hands drove red-hot rivets into his skull. Presently the agony abated. He was able to rise again and make his way feebly to the jug, which he had now come to look on as his only friend in the world. He had just finished his second non-stop draught when something attracted his notice out of the corner of his eye, and he saw that in the window beside him were framed a head and shoulders.
"Hi,"
observed the head, in a voice like a lorry full of steel girders passing over cobblestones.
"I've brought you a cup of tea."
2. The head was red in color and ornamented halfway down by a large and impressive mustache, waxed at the ends. The shoulders were broad and square, the eyes prawn-like. The whole apparition, in short, one could tell at a glance, was a sample or first installment of the person of a sergeant major. And unless he had dropped from heaven, which, from John's knowledge of sergeant majors, seemed unlikely, the newcomer must be standing on top of a ladder. And such, indeed, was the case. Sergeant Major Flannery, though no acrobat, had nobly risked life and limb by climbing to this upper window to see how his charge was getting on, and to bring him a little refreshment.
"Take your cup of tea, young fellow,"
said Mr. Flannery. The hospitality had arrived too late. In the matter of tea-drinking, John was handicapped by the fact that he had just swallowed approximately a third of a jug of water. He regretted to be compelled to reject the contribution for lack of space. But as what he desired most at the moment was human society and conversation, he advanced eagerly to the window.
"Who are you?"
he asked.
"Flannery's my name, young fellow."
"How did I get here?"
"In that room."
"Yes."
"I put you there."
"You did you?" said John.
"Open this door at once, damn you."
The sergeant major shook his head.
"Language," he said reprovingly. "Profanity won't do you no good, young man. Cursing and swearing won't help you. You just drink your cup of tea and don't let's have no nonsense. If you'd made a habit in the past of drinking more tea and less of the other thing, you wouldn't be in what I may call your present predicament."
"Will you open this door?"
"No, sir, I will not open that door. There aren't going to be no doors open till your conduct and behavior has been carefully examined in the course of a day or so, and we can be sure there'll be no virulence."
"Listen," said John, curbing a desire to jab at this man through the bars with the teaspoon.
I don't know who you are. Flannery's the name, sir, as I said before. Sergeant Major Flannery.
But I can't believe you're in this business.
Indeed I am, sir. I am Dr. Twist's assistant.
But this man is a criminal, you fool. Sergeant Major Flannery seemed pained rather than annoyed.
Come, sir. A little civility, if you please. This what I may call contumacious attitude isn't helping you. Surely you can see that for yourself. Always remember, sir, the voice with the smile wins.
This fellow Twist burgled our house last night, and all the while you're keeping me shut up here, he's getting away.
Is that so, sir? What house would that be?
Rudge Hall.
Never heard of it.
It's near Rudge in the Vale, 20 miles from here, Mr. Carmody's place.
Mr. Lester Carmody, who was here taking the cure?
Yes, I'm his nephew.
His nephew, eh?
Yes.
Come.
What do you mean?
It so happens,
said Mr. Flannery with quiet satisfaction, removing one hand from the window bars in order to fondle his mustache,
that I've seen Mr. Carmody's nephew. Tallish, thinnish, pleasant-faced young fellow. He was over here to visit Mr. Carmody during the latter's temporary residence. I had him pointed out to me.
Painful though the process was, John felt compelled to grit his teeth.
That was Mr. Carmody's other nephew. Other nephew, eh?
My cousin.
Your cousin, eh?
His name's Hugo.
Hugo, eh?
Good God, cried John. Are you a parrot? Mr. Flannery, if he had not been standing on a ladder, would no doubt have drawn himself up haughtily at this outburst. Being none too certain of his footing, he contented himself with looking offended.
No, sir,
he said, with the dignity which became him well.
In reply to your question, I am not a parrot. I am a salaried assistant at Dr. Twist's health establishment, detailed to look after the patients and keep them away from the cigarettes and see that they do their exercises in a proper manner. And as I said to the young lady, I understand human nature, and am a match for artfulness of any description. What's more, it was precisely this kind of artfulness on your part that the young lady warned me against. Be careful, Sergeant Major, she said to me, clasping her hands in what I may call an agony of appeal, that this poor misguided young son of a whatnot don't come out over you with his talk about being the lost heir of some family living in the near neighborhood. Because she's sure to try it on, you can take it from me, Sergeant Major, she said. And I said to the young lady, Miss, I said, he won't come at over Egbert Flannery. Not him. I've seen too much of that sort of thing, miss, I said. And the young lady said, God's truth, Sergeant Major, she said. I wish there was more men in the world like you, Sergeant Major, because then it would be a damn sight better place than it is, Sergeant Major.
He paused, and realizing an omission, added the words,
She said.
John clutched at his throbbing head. Young lady? What young lady?
You know well enough what young lady, sir. The young lady what brought you here to leave you in our charge. That young lady.
That young lady?
Yes, sir. The one who brought you here.
Brought me here?
And left you in our charge.
Left me in your charge?
Come, sir,
said Mr. Flannery.
Are you a parrot?
The adroit thrust made no impression on John. His mind was too busy to recognize it for what it was, viz., about the cleverest repartee ever uttered by a non-commissioned officer of His Majesty's regular forces. A monstrous suspicion had smitten him, with the effect almost of a physical blow. Suspicion? It was more than a suspicion. If it was at Dolly Malloy's request that he was now locked up in this infernal room, then, bizarre as it might seem, Dolly Malloy must in some way be connected with the nefarious activities of the man Twist. The links that connected the two might be obscure, but as to the fact there could be no doubt whatever. You mean? He gasped.
I mean your sister, sir, who brought you over here in her car.
What? That was my car.
No, sir, that won't do. I saw her myself driving off in it some hours ago. She waved her hand to me, said Mr. Flannery, caressing his mustache, and allowing a note of tender sentiment to creep into his voice. Yes, sir, she turned and waved her hand.
John made no reply. He was beyond speech. Trifling though it might seem to an insurance company in comparison with the loss of Rudge Hall's more valuable treasures, the theft of the two-seater smote him a blow from which he could not hope to rally. He loved his Widgeon 7. He had nursed it, tended it, oiled it, watered it, watched over it in sickness and in health, as if it had been a baby sister, and now it had gone.
"Look here," he cried feverishly, "you must let me out of here at once." "No, sir, I promised your sister." "She isn't my sister. I haven't got a sister. Good heavens, man, can't you understand?" "I understand very well, sir. Artfulness. I was prepared for it."
Sergeant Major Flannery paused for an instant.
"The young lady," he said dreamily, "was afraid, too, that you might try to bribe me. She warned me most particular."
John did not speak. His Widgeon 7, gone.
"Bribe me,"
repeated Sergeant Major Flannery, his eyes widening. It was evident that the mere thought of such a thing sickened this good man.
"She said you would try to bribe me to let you go."
"Well, you can make your mind easy," said John between his teeth. "I haven't any money." There was a moment's silence. Then Mr. Flannery said, "How?" in a rather short manner, and silence fell again. It was broken by the sergeant major in a moralizing vein.
"It's a wonder to me,"
he said, and there was peevishness in his voice,
"that a young fellow with a lovely sister like what you've got could bring himself to lower himself to the beasts of the field, as the saying is. Drink in moderation is one thing. Mopping it up and becoming virulent and a nuisance to all is another. If you'd ever seen one of them lantern slides showing what alcohol does to the liver of the excessive drinker, maybe you'd have pulled up sharp while there was time. And not," said the sergeant major, still with that oddly querulous note in his voice, "have wasted all your money on what could only do you harm. If you hadn't have given so to your self-indulgence and what I may call besottedness, you would now have your pocket full of money to spend how you fancied."
He sighed.
"Your cup of tea's got cold,"
he said moodily. "I don't want any tea."
"Then I'll be leaving you," said Mr. Flannery. "If you require anything, press the bell. Nobody'll take any notice of it."
He withdrew cautiously down the ladder, and, having paused at the bottom to shake his head reproachfully, disappeared from view. John did not miss him. His desire for company had passed. What he wanted now was to be alone and to think. Not that there was any likelihood of his thoughts being pleasant ones. The more he contemplated the iniquity of the Malloy family, the deeper did the iron enter into his soul. If ever he set eyes on Thomas G. Malloy again... He set eyes on him again, oddly enough, at this very moment. From where he stood, looking out through the bars of the window, there was visible to him a considerable section of the drive. And up the drive, at this juncture, toiling painfully, came Mr. Malloy in person, seated on a bicycle. As John craned his neck and glared down with burning eyes, the rider dismounted, and the bicycle, which appeared to have been waiting for the chance, bit him neatly in the ankle with its left pedal. John was too far away to hear the faint cry of agony which escaped the suffering man, but he could see his face. It was a bright crimson face, powdered with dust, and its features were twisted in anguish. John went back to the jug and took another long drink. In the spectacle just presented to him he had found a faint feeble glimmering of consolation. End of chapter 11. Chapter 12. Unpleasant scene between two old friends. 1. On leaving John, Sergeant Major Flannery's first act was to go to what he was accustomed to call the orderly room and make his report. He reached it only a few minutes after its occupants returned to consciousness. Chimp Twist had opened his eyes and staggered to his feet at just about the moment when the sergeant major was offering John the cup of tea. Mr. Twist's initial discovery, like John's, was that he had a headache. He then set himself to try to decide where he was. His mind clearing a little, he was enabled to gather that he was in England, and, assembling the facts by degrees, in his study at Halford Hoe, formerly Graveney Court, Worcestershire. After that, everything came back to him, and he stood holding to the table with one hand and still grasping the lily with the other, and gave himself up to scorching reflections on the subject of the resourceful Mrs. Malloy. He was still busy with these when there was a forceful knock on the door and Sergeant Major Flannery entered. Chimp's grip of the table tightened. He held himself together like one who sees a match set to a train of gunpowder and awaits the shattering explosion. His visitor's lips had begun to move, and Chimp could guess how that parade ground voice was going to sound to a man with a headache like his. Began Mr. Flannery, clearing his throat, and Chimp, with a sharp cry, reeled to a chair and sank into it. The noise had hit him like a shell. He cowered where he sat, peering at the sergeant major with haggard eyes.
"Oh,
boomed Mr. Flannery, noting these symptoms.
You aren't looking up to the mark, Mr. Twist."
Chimp dropped the lily, feeling the necessity of having both hands free. He found he experienced a little relief if he put the palms over his eyes and pressed hard.
"I'll tell you what it is, sir,"
roared the sympathetic sergeant major.
"What's happened here is that nasty feverish cold of yours has gone and struck inwards. It's left your head and has penetrated internally to your vitals. If only you'd have took Torexicum and Ops like I told you." "Go away,"
moaned Chimp, adding in a low voice what seemed to him a suitable destination. Mr. Flannery regarded him with mild reproach.
"There's nothing gained, Mr. Twist, by telling me to get to L out of here. I've merely come for the single and simple reason that I thought you would wish to know that I've had a conversation with the virulent case upstairs, and the way it looks to me, sir, subject to your approval, is that it'd be best not to let him out from under lock and key for some time to come. True, we did not attempt anything in the nature of actual physical attack, being prevented no doubt by the fact that there was iron bars between him and me, but his manner throughout was peculiar, not to say odd, and I recommend that all communications be conducted till further notice through the window." "Do what you like,"
said Chimp faintly.
"It isn't what I like, sir," bellowed Mr. Flannery virtuously. "It's what you like and instruct, me being in your employment and only here to carry out your orders smartly as you give them. And there's one other matter, sir. As perhaps you are aware, the young lady went off in the little car." "Don't talk to me about the young lady." "I was only about to say, Mr. Twist, that you will doubtless be surprised to hear that for some reason or another, having started to go off in the little car, the young lady apparently decided on second thoughts to continue her journey by train. She left the little car at Lowick Station with instructions that it be returned here. I found that young Jakes, the station master's son, outside within a moment ago. Tooting the horn, he was, the young rascal, and saying he wanted half a crown. Using my own discretion, I clumped him on the head and gave him 6p. You may reimburse me at your leisure and when convenient. Shall I take the little car and put it in the garage, sir?"
Chimp gave eager assent to this proposition, as he would have done to any proposition which appeared to carry with it the prospect of removing this man from his presence.
"It's funny the young lady leaving the little car at the station, sir,"
mused Mr. Flannery, in a voice that shook the chandelier.
"I suppose she happened to reach there at a moment when a train was signalled and decided that she preferred not to overtax her limited strength by driving to London. I fancy she must have had London as her objective."
Chimp fancied so, too. A picture rose before his eyes of Dolly and Soapy revelling together in the metropolis, with the loot of Rudge Hall bestowed in some safe place where he would never be able to get at it. The picture was so vivid that he uttered a groan.
"Where does it catch you, sir?"
asked Mr. Flannery solicitously.
"Eh?" "The pain, sir, the agony you appear to be suffering. If you take my advice, you'll get off to bed and put an hot water bottle on your stomach. Lay it right across the abdomen, sir. It may draw the poison out. I had an old aunt." "I don't want to hear about your aunt." "Very good, sir. Just as you wish." "Tell me about her some other time." "Any time that suits you, sir," said Mr. Flannery agreeably. "Well, I'll be off and putting the little car in the garage."
He left the room, and Chimp, withdrawing his hands from his eyes, gave himself up to racking thought. A man recovering from knockout drops must necessarily see things in a jaundiced light, but it is scarcely probable that, even had he been in robust health, Mr. Twist's meditations would have been much pleasanter. Condensed, they resolved themselves, like John's, into a passionate wish that he could meet Soapy Malloy again, if only for a moment. And he had hardly decided that such a meeting was the only thing which life now had to offer, when the door opened again and the maid appeared.
"Mr. Malloy to see you, sir."
Chimp started from his chair.
"Show him in,"
he said in a tense, husky voice. There was a shuffling noise without, and Soapy appeared in the doorway. 2. The progress of Mr. Malloy across the threshold of Ch10-12's study bore a striking resemblance to that of some spent runner breasting the tape at the conclusion of a more than usually grueling marathon race. His hair was disordered, his face streaked with dust and heat, and his legs acted so independently of his body that they gave him an odd appearance of moving in several directions at once. An unbiased observer, seeing him, could not but have felt a pang of pity for this wreck of what had once, apparently, been a fine upstanding man. Chimp was not an unbiased observer. He did not pity his old business partner. Judging from a first glance, Soapy Malloy seemed to him to have been caught in some sort of machinery and subsequently run over by several motor lorries, and Chimp was glad of it. He would have liked to seek out the men in charge of that machinery and the drivers of those lorries and reward them handsomely.
"So here you are,"
he said. Mr. Malloy, navigating cautiously, backed and filled in the direction of the armchair. Reaching it after considerable difficulty, he gripped its sides and lowered himself with infinite weariness. A sharp exclamation escaped him as he touched the cushions. Then, sinking back, he closed his eyes and immediately went to sleep. Chimp gazed down at him, seething with resentment that made his head ache worse than ever. That Soapy should have had the cold, callous crust to come to Healthford Ho at all after what had happened was sufficiently infuriating. That, having come, he should proceed without a word of explanation or apology to treat the study as a bedroom was more than Chimp could endure. Stooping down, he gripped his old friend by his luxuriant hair and waggled his head smartly from side to side several times. The treatment proved effective. Soapy sat up.
"Eh?"
he said, blinking.
"What do you mean, eh?" "Which? Why, where am I?" "I'll tell you where you are." "Oh,"
said Mr. Malloy, intelligence returning. He sank back among the cushions again. Now that the first agony of contact was over, he was finding their softness delightful. In the matter of seats, a man who has ridden 20 miles on an elderly push-bicycle becomes an exacting critic.
"Gee, I feel bad,"
he murmured. It was a natural remark, perhaps, for a man in his condition to make, but it had the effect of adding several degrees Fahrenheit to his companion's already impressive warmth. For some moments Ch10-12, wrestling with his emotion, could find no form of self-expression beyond a curious spluttering noise.
"Yes, sir,"
proceeded Mr. Malloy.
"I feel bad. All the way over here on a bicycle, Chimpy. That's where I've been. It's in the calf of the leg that it gets me principally. There and around the instep. And I wish I had $1 for every bruise those darn pedals have made on me." "And what about me?"
demanded Chimp, at last ceasing to splutter.
"Yes, sir,"
said Mr. Malloy wistfully.
"I certainly wish someone would come along and offer me even as much as 50 cents for every bruise I've gotten from the ankles upwards. They come out on me like a rash or something."
"If you had my headache."
"Yes, I've a headache, too,"
said Mr. Malloy.
"It was the hot sun beating down on my neck that did it. There were times when I thought really I'd have to pass the thing up. Say, if you knew what I feel like."
"And how about what I feel like?" shrilled Mr. Twist, quivering with self-pity.
"A nice thing that was that wife of yours did to me. A fine trick to play on a business partner. Slipping stuff into my highball that laid me out cold. Is that any way to behave? Is that a system?"
Mr. Malloy considered the point.
"The madam is mighty impulsive,"
he admitted.
"And leaving me laying there and putting a lily in my hand. That was her playfulness," explained Mr. Malloy. "Girls will have their bit of fun."
"Fun, say." Mr. Malloy felt that it was time to point to the moral.
"It was your fault, Chimpy. You brought it on yourself by acting greedy and trying to get the earth. If you had stood us up for that 65-35 of yours, all this would never have happened. Naturally, no high-spirited girl like the madam wasn't going to stand for nothing like that. But listen while I tell you what I've come about. If you're willing to can all that stuff and have a fresh deal and a square one this time, 1/3 to me, 1/3 to you, and 1/3 to the madam, I'll put you up to something that'll make you feel good. Yes, sir. You'll go singing about the house."
"The only thing that you could tell me that would make me feel good," replied Chimp churlishly, "would be that you'd tumbled off that bicycle of yours and broken your damned neck." Mr. Malloy was pained.
"Is that nice, Chimpy?"
Mr. Twist wished to know if, in the circumstances, and after what had occurred, Mr. Malloy expected him to kiss him. Mr. Malloy said no, but where was the sense of harsh words? Where did harsh words get anybody? When had harsh words ever paid any dividend?
"If you had a headache like mine, Chimpy,"
said Mr. Malloy reproachfully,
"you'd know how it felt to sit and listen to an old friend giving you the razz."
Chimp was obliged to struggle for a while with the sudden return of his spluttering.
A headache like yours? Where do you get that stuff? My headache's a darn sight worse than your headache. It couldn't be, Chimpy. If you want to know what a headache really is, you take some of those KO drops you're so fond of. Well, putting that on one side, said Mr. Malloy, wisely forbearing to argue, let me tell you what I've come here about. Chimpy, that guy Carmody has double-crossed us. He was on to us from the start. What? Yes, sir. I had it from his own lips in person. And do you know what he done? He took that stuff out of the closet and sent his chauffeur over to Worcester to put it in the left luggage place at the depot there. What? Yes, sir. Gee, said Mr. Twist, impressed. That was smooth. Then you haven't got it, do you mean? No, I haven't got it.
Mr. Twist had never expected to feel anything in the nature of elation that day, or for many days to come, but at these words something like ecstasy came upon him. He uttered a delighted laugh, which, owing to sudden agony in the head, changed to a muffled howl.
So after all your smartness, he said,
removing his hands from his temples as the spasm passed,
you're no better off than what I am. We're both sitting pretty, Chimpy, if we get together and act quick. How's that? Act how? I'll tell you. This chauffeur guy left the stuff and brought home the ticket. And gave it to old man Carmody, I suppose. Well, where does that get us? No, sir. He didn't give it to old man Carmody. He gave it to that young Carroll fella,
said Mr. Malloy. The significance of the information was not lost upon Chimp. He stared at Mr. Malloy.
Carroll,
he said.
You mean the bird upstairs? Is he upstairs? Sure he's upstairs, locked in a room with bars on the window. You're certain he has the ticket? I know he has. So all we've got to do now is get it off him. That's all. That's all. And how,
inquired Chimp,
do you propose to do it?
Mr. Malloy made no immediate reply. The question was one which, in the intervals of dodging the pedals of his bicycle, he had been asking himself ever since he had left Rudge Hall. He had hoped that in the enthusiasm of the moment some spontaneous solution would leap from his old friend's lips, but it was plain that this was not to be.
I thought maybe you would think of a way, Chimpy,
he was compelled to confess.
Oh, me, eh? You're smart, said Mr. Malloy deferentially. You've got a head. Whatever anyone said about you, no one's ever denied that. You'll think of a way. I will I? And while I'm doing it, you'll just sit back, I suppose, and have a nice rest. And all you're suggesting that I'm to get out of it, now, Chimpy,
quavered Mr. Malloy. He had feared this development.
Is a measly 1/3. Say, let me tell you. Now, Chimpy,
urged Mr. Malloy with unshed tears in his voice.
Let's not start all that over again. We settled the terms. Gentleman's agreement. It's all fixed. Is it? Come down out of the clouds. You're scaring the birds. What I want now, if I'm going to do all the work and help you out of a tough spot, is 70-30. 70-30?
echoed Mr. Malloy, appalled.
And if you don't like it, let's hear you suggest a way of getting that ticket off that guy upstairs. Maybe you'd like to go up and have a talk with him. If he's feeling anything like the way I felt when I came to after those KO drops of yours, he'll be glad to see you. What does it matter to you if he pulls your head off and drops it out the window? You can only live once, so what the hell?
Mr. Malloy gazed dismally before him. Never a very inventive man, his bicycle ride had left him even less capable of inspiration than usual. He had to admit himself totally lacking in anything resembling a constructive plan of campaign. He yearned for his dear wife's gentle presence. Dolly was the bright one of the family. In a crisis like this she would have been full of ideas, each one a crackerjack.
We can't keep him locked up in that room forever, he said unhappily. We don't have to. Not if you agree to my 70-30. Have you thought of a way, then? Sure, I've thought of a way.
Mr. Malloy's depression became more marked than ever. He knew what this meant. The moment he gave up the riddle, that miserable little chimp would come out with some scheme which had been staring him in the face all along, if only he had had the intelligence to see it.
Well,
said Chimp,
think quick. And remember 30's better than nothing. And don't say when I told you that it's just the idea you've had yourself from the start.
Mr. Malloy urged his weary brain to one last spurt of activity, but without result. He was a specialist. He could sell shares in phantom oil wells better than anybody on either side of the Atlantic, but there he stopped. Outside his speciality, he was almost a total loss.
All right, Chimpy,
he sighed, facing the inevitable.
70-30. 70-30. Though how I'm to break it to the madam I don't know. She won't like it, Chimpy. It'll be a nasty blow for the madam." "I hope it chokes her,"
said Chimp unchivalrously.
"Her and her lilies. Well, then, here's what we do. When Flannery takes the guy his coffee and eggs tomorrow, there'll be something in the pot besides coffee. There'll be some of those KO drops of yours, and then all we have to do is just simply walk upstairs and dig the ticket out of his clothes, and there we are."
Mr. Malloy uttered an agonized cry. His presentiment had been correct.
"I'd thought of that myself,"
he wailed.
"Sure you would,"
replied Chimp comfortably.
"if you'd have had something that wasn't a Hubbard squash or something where your head ought to be. These just as good imitation heads never pay in the long run. What you ought to do is sell yours for what it'll fetch and get a new one. And next time," said Chimp, "make it a prettier one."
End of chapter 12.